Welcome to Conversations with Dr. Harriet and our special guest, Reverend Timothy Lee. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. Doing great. How are you doing today?
I am so wonderful. I am so
Awesome.
happy that you have taken time out of your schedule in Chicago, Illinois, to hang out
Yes.
with us right here on Conversations on the Power Network. So, our topic for today is God sets seasons, times, and purpose. But before we go into our topic, I want you to tell the few people who may not know who you are a little bit about yourself.
Oh, great. Yes, my name is Reverend Timothy Lee. I've been in, as I say, full-time ministry, I should say, for 30 some years. I was born in it because my father's a pastor still. He's 83.
PK.
I'm a PK. My father's 83 and he's still a senior pastor today. So
Oh,
it's
wow.
been somewhere into the 30 some years that I've been doing this and about 20 some years in full-time ministry or more. So my ministry has taken me throughout the length and breadth of the country, either evangelizing, senior pastor of the church in Davenport, Iowa, Rock Island, Illinois, East Moline. This is called the Quad City area. Right now, the church is in East Moline, where it's pastored by Pastor Corey Parker. Started that church 16 years ago. They're doing well and thriving. And my ministry has taken me from preaching in many various platforms, as well as working in about two or three churches as well, doing leadership development, as well as my mentor ministry I always speak of is Apostle Richard Daniel Hinton from the Monument of Faith Church in
Yes,
Chicago.
yes.
And yes, he has passed on, but he mentored me as a leader, as a preacher, as a minister. And I'm excited about what we do, especially leadership development and just speaking words of life to God's people across the country.
That is so awesome. And you also have, well, shout out to your wife and your wonderful children as
Yes,
well.
yes, yes. My wife, I've been married for 25 years in November, and I have three wonderful kids as well. My kids, Timothy Lee Jr., who is a minister in training, as I call him, and God has gifted him in ministry, and he's 20 years old. And my daughter, my middle child, Sydney Lee, who is 16, and my baby daughter, Simone, who's 11. Of course, my wife, Stephanda Lee, who co-pastored and co-founded our first work that we ever begun together with me. So God has blessed me with a wonderful family.
That is so awesome. Now, I know that you have two Facebook Live show, Real Talk with Reverend Timothy Lee, and also Living Life with Timothy Lee as well. So they can go to your Facebook pages and check those out live as well, right?
Correct, correct. They can link in and they can watch those as they roll out from the studio onto our platforms. One of them being Facebook that they can watch it on. Correct, and it'll be also rolling on a couple of networks here soon in the future. So they can go to my Facebook and see that information as well as the time comes.
Okay, so inviting everyone to go to your pages and check you out and to like your pages, subscribe, and make sure to definitely listen in. They will definitely be blessed.
Yes.
So when we were talking about topics, there's so many different things that you cover in your Facebook Lives. And so I said, you definitely have to come back and do another one, but I know I love how you talk about history. You're a history buff, I can tell.
Yes.
And so you do a lot on history. You do a lot on social justice as well as relationships, and you cover so many different things. And so, but we did single it out to get one topic for today, and that is God sets seasons, times, and purpose. So tell us how that topic came about, and we'll jump right into it.
Well, that topic resonates with me, seasons, times, and purpose, because the Bible says that every time there's a season. So seasons are major in our life. So he sets the times and then he sets the purpose. We come to life and we're born in different seasons. And whatever timing that we're born into that season, there's a purpose that God has for us to do what he's called us to do, to function within our destiny call for being released on earth, as humans. So I think that's very important. So those three things come together. The purpose, the seasons, and God dictates the seasons. And of course, the timing. And we have a lot to do with the timing because that's our decisions. We'll delve into that a little later. But all those three things go together, which dictate the outcomes of our life.
That is so true. I was talking to someone the other day, and we were even talking about marriage and how in marriage there are seasons in your life where you'll start off with your newlywed, season, and then you have you're raising your kids and building your life, and then you end up with that emptiness, season, and then you have your retirement season, and all of it goes together, but it's all separate,
right?
And we grow in every season. And so I was just talking about that with someone the other day. But that goes along with every aspect of our life, correct?
Correct. It really does.
Yes.
It really does. Everything is seasonal. And a lot of times we make permanent decisions in a season, and it may be a learning season, and we're trying to reap during that season. And that will make us, function off of the wrong premise, because that's not the season for us to reap, but the season for us to learn. But we're trying to reap during a learning season, it'll be a disaster because you'll wind up having a premature blessing or a premature outcome. So it's very important that we learn how to manage our seasons, move through seasons. I call it reading life. We got to learn how to read life, read the seasons, let God lead us through the seasons, so we can wind up at the final destination that He's called us to go.
Right. So where does the season and your purpose come into? Because, some people, well, a lot of people are still stuck on, what is my purpose? Why am I here? What did God put me here for? And so how do you relate those two together? Well, because sometimes it does change. Well, it does change as you evolve through life, correct?
Correct. Correct. As people, we evolve, we adapt. The number one hallmark of people being able to survive through various seasons is adaptation. So we adapt, but our purpose stays the same. There's one root purpose why we're here. Some people say, well, my purpose is to win souls. Our purpose is to do this and do that. But there's a purpose that you come to earth for. When I look at people like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., there's a purpose that he came to this earth for. Nelson Mandela, there's a purpose that he came for. Abraham Lincoln, there's a purpose. Abraham Lincoln was a lawyer. He was one of the presidents, the 16th president. But beyond all of that, Abraham Lincoln's purpose was to move the African Americans forward from where we were in slavery to begin to realize the possibilities of freedom, to experience emancipation and freedom. That was his main purpose, not just to be a lawyer. He was a lawyer who became a politician, who became a president, but he became an emancipator. And being an emancipator was his purpose on earth. That's what he's remembered for.
That's right. That's right. And same with Martin Luther King. He, was here for a short period of time, but in his time, he did so much.
So much was done. So I think when you look at that, so you look at your purpose, but within God gives us a singular purpose. But in various seasons, you'll find yourself doing different things as you build up toward that climax or the culmination of really why you're here. We're born, I call it survival of the fittest. Everyone doesn't make it. Some people die from the same disease that other people survive from. God knows everything. I do a lot of reading and done studying multi-religious platforms on death, near-death experiences, what people say when they come back after saying they crossed over. And one of the main things that I have heard consistently is that you understand why things occur in life once you stepped over to the other side.
Oh, wow.
And what happens is, while we're living here, a lot of times we don't understand why certain things occur. So life in our seasons can kind of be like a jigsaw or puzzle. We're trying to figure out, well, where do all the pieces go together? And sometimes that is really indicative and it's connected to your purpose, because a lot of times people don't know what their purpose is. Because you're doing something today, it doesn't mean you'll do that tomorrow. We have to be willing to shift within the call that God has put us here on earth. You may be doing one thing for 5 years, but God may call you to do something else 5 years later. And that's leading you to your main purpose and existence for being here in life. So during that, our seasons naturally occur. On earth, we have, of course, we have spring, we have summer, we have fall, and we have winter. And in all those seasons, people tend to have different habits. People tend to dress differently. People tend to have different expectations. Sometimes in life, I don't think we teach enough about spiritual seasons or life seasons, because we just live and we think that everything's going to be the same consistently.
Right. Yes.
But
Talk about
nothing will remain consistent and the same, because it's God's desire for us to learn. And we learn different things. Our faith is increased from season to season. Our purposes are revealed from season to season. A lot of times you may not know your final purpose, but you have just a portion of it. But once you go from one season to the next, God reveals. It's like you have the seed, corn that goes into the ground. It's seen as a seed in the middle of spring. But as we go into the summer, you see it as a shoot or a stalk of corn.
right.
But if you go ahead and follow that all the way into the fall, when it's reaped, you're going to see one. Corn technically is a fruit. We call it a vegetable. Technically, it's a fruit. So you got that corn, and it's multiple ears of corn on one stalk, and then they have multiple seeds, which we call kernels of corn.
Right.
So the realization of that seed comes into fruition, that I go in as a seed in one season, I turn around in the summer and I start to grow as a stalk of corn with various ears. And then when I realize or actualize by whoever owns me or sees me, they see that I have a whole bunch of seeds. I'm in my fullness, but then I have a whole bunch of seeds to me. So there's things for me to give out amongst the earth so I can reduplicate myself and multiply.
Wow, that is good. Good analogy. I like that.
Oh.
That is really good. And and how would we apply even we talk about seasons and times and purpose. God may place us, at a place at a particular time for a season.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's time for us to go.
Right.
Fulfill our purpose, right?
Right. That's very true. And I think that sometimes we get stuck at when do we make moves.
That's the point I wanted to ask you about.
Yes.
Exactly.
Exiting and entering. I should say entering and exiting seasons. How do you do it? How do you do it with class? How do you do it with excellence? Because you enter into a season don't mean that season is permanent. So we know all seasons are transient. And I think what happens is we fall in love with where God has us at that time. And then we'll find ourselves we're just there. That's all we're doing. That's all we're doing. That's all we're doing.
Right.
And then the problem with that is when it's time to move, you get comfortable. And you'll find yourself being in this. Here's the thing about ministry and life, period. You'll find yourself being in the will of God yesterday. And tomorrow you could be out of the perfect will because you didn't move with the season. The greatest example I have is Elijah at the brook of Cherith. God sent him to the brook of Cherith because there was going to be a raven that was going to bring meat and there was going to be water that would keep him nourished. But there came a time where the brook dried up. Now, if he had stayed by the brook, when it was dried up, he would have died. But God said, "Oh, Elijah, I have someone prepared for you in Zarephath. Go to Zarephath, and I will sustain you." So he was in the will, he was in the purpose, but his seasons was beginning to change. He had to be willing to leave what he had become accustomed to. Could you imagine eating meat off the king's table or wherever the ravens got the meat from that was already cooked, and having all your water supplied while the rest of the nation is in drought? And then all of a sudden it just dries up. If it hadn't dried up, he would have stayed in that
Right.
season. So a lot of times God will cause situations to arise to move us from one season to the next season. Otherwise, you'll stay in love with the current season, and that'd be the wrong season to get the pure blessing that God has for you in and on your life. And for ministers and preachers and pastors, a lot of times that's a struggle. I found myself in about 3 to 4 major transitions in my life. And each time I had to figure out how to enter and exit each season. Some of them were smooth exits. Some of them was rough exits. Because it's always something that's going to help push you so you go to your next place. But you have to understand that everything works according to the will of God. And if you stay within the proper season, the blessings of God will follow.
And, and that's my next question I wanted to ask you about, talking about moving on in a season, and that your season is up, your time is up at that, place, whether it's a ministry or it's your job. How do you exit in a way that, because a lot of people would like to hold on to you. You're a wonderful minister. You have an amazing family. You're a good tithe payer. You're a good offering giver. And so, of course, they want to hold on to you, and your family. How do you exit with, like you said, with class and let it be a smooth exit?
I think that it always takes two parties to work together to make the exit work in perfection. I'll never forget the first major exit I made. I should say the second exit. And when I was making an exit from my father's church, who I worked for 10 consecutive years, and I ran all the facets of ministry. We had an international, not a denomination, but a fellowship of churches and missions that spanned from Africa to America, from all over, that I was the direct administrator of that whole thing, as well as I had my own blooming evangelistic and preaching ministry. So I was kind of torn. And I knew I was hearing the voice of God, that it was time to start my own ministry in the same city. So can you imagine that? And it was very stressful. I went in and I gave them a time period of when I wanted to transition. And it escapes me now as time goes. But I think it was about a year. I think I said it would be about a year, something like that I'll be looking to transition. And it dropped to 6 months. It dropped to 3 months because we had problems reconciling me leaving. And I don't have an issue talking about it openly because it's so many years ago. But it took my father a whole year to come to my church. Now, my mother was there opening day.
Right.
She was there opening day. Apostle Hinton, all these pastors who were my support structures, they were all behind it 100%, understanding I had to find God's destiny for myself. But it was hard for my father because he was looking for me to be the one that was going to take the ministry at that point. But sometimes what people want you to do may not be God's perfect will for you.
Right.
I think sometimes it's easy to get caught in tradition. Well, it's my church. I'm going to hand it off to my son, and then, he'll be able to carry things. I pretty much was running everything as it was. So, he was a face of the ministry. Yes, he was a senior pastor of it, but I was handling a lot of the preaching responsibilities, the financials, all those type of things. And I was raising a lot of the money there. So I was really almost at that point, the second heartbeat. The shepherd's always the first heartbeat, but him being my father, we worked very close together. And I think it was just tough. And sometimes there could be a feel of rejection. Why is my son eating? What's up with this? He's leaving. Right. But it's never personal. It's always about the will of God. So eventually we worked through it, but it took time and it took years. I would still go back and preach for his church. I was still always readily available to serve. But it took several years for us to really sit down at the table and really clear the air on me really making that transition. And then we were okay.
Yeah. And I'm hearing you say decent and in order.
Decent.
That's what I'm hearing you.
And in order.
Yeah.
You don't take people. Look, I have people that said, Pastor, when you go, we going with you. I told them, you can't come with me. I won't allow you to come with me. I won't take you as a member. I said, because I'm not going to do anything to hurt the church that I was born into. See, just because I have a call of God on my life. And at that time, me and my father's relationship was strained, even though we worked well together in ministry, behind the scenes, it was very strained. but I didn't let that strained relationship get in the way of my integrity.
Right. The
So I
integrity.
still made sure that I said, you're not coming. You stay where God's planted you. What I'm doing, that's what God called me to do. What you're doing, you're planted here. And you know what? God blessed the work of my hand. I'll never forget the first Sunday. I think we had 200 and almost 250 people. They were lined up to get in on an Easter Sunday morning. And I'll never forget, I was full-time ministry, and I went from being full-time ministry, working for my father's church for 10 years, making a very solid salary, to being the full-time ministry, my own ministry. I never missed a beat in regards to during our transition time. God provided. And it was all about, I believe that God rewarded the integrity for me not going, because his people, I mean, he was older. I was young. I had energy. And a lot of times people look at that. But I always look at it as, you know, I'm kind of young. I'm 48 now. So I call myself still kind of young. But there's going to be a time where I advance in age. And I don't want a young Absalom to come up into my ministry and into my life and to cipher.
Right.
So you must do things correctly. Otherwise, the blessings of God will not be upon you. Let me tell you a quick story. There was a gentleman that came into that whole situation after I left, because there was a great gaping hole. And he had preached all over the world. I won't name the ministers that he was attached with, but it was major. And he came into town and he tried to come and siphon people, even from that church that my father had. And with him being in a weakened state, because I had left, and a lot of people were looking for me to be the successor. And so that kind of changed some of the dynamics at that time. My father had a very thriving ministry, television ministry, and I don't mean Access Channel. I mean the real deal, back when you had to take tapes to the real stations. So he had all those things going on. And the man saw an opportunity, but he went in wrong, prophesying over people, telling them, you know, things are dried up there, you need to move on. At the end of the day, you can't find him in ministry anyway. He went from traveling the world renowned, to now maybe working for another secular company, but ministry is not even in there, all because he did not handle things right. And I always made up in my mind, I'm going to do things right, because I'm not going to go to hell, and I'm not going to miss the best that God has for me.
That's right.
Reasons and gains.
That's right. And even as we were speaking of on our jobs as well,
yes.
You know, leaving decent and in order. That's a 2-week notice. That's what they tell you. That's proper, a 2-week notice. So we, you know, do it right and then leave right. And, you know, even when you're leaving, don't take all the stuff that you know don't belong to you.
Don't take the pencils,
but, you know, it's always the running joke that, you know, they always let you know that you're not coming back at the end of the day, because they know you'll probably clean them out during the day if you know it's your last day.
They march you out. They march you out with security. That's right.
Right. So leaving decent and in order. So again, let's talk about, even with purpose. When you talk about purpose, and I know we talked about seasons, we talked about times, but talk a little bit about purpose for those people who are watching who may not still understand when you talk about what is my purpose.
I really believe that your purposes that God gives you for your existence, they're born, they're innate within you. However, once we start living life, people tell us what we cannot do, what we're not able to do. They tell us that we are not, it's too hard. It's you know, when you were a kid, we all had these beliefs that I could do anything I want. I could be a doctor, a lawyer, I could do all this. But then someone came and they started putting limits on us and told us, well, you have to choose, you have to pick. You can't do all those things. Someone told an individual that you may be talented, but I don't think that's God's will for your life. So all of a sudden you find yourself truncating your whole vision for your life. And the passion that you're born with, that's where it's at. I was a born talker, and I was a looker. I was always looking. My mother told me when I was born, and my mother, bless her heart, is almost 80 years old, and she fights for her health at this stage. But at 80 years old, I remember that she told me for years that I was born my eyes open.
Wow.
I was just looking, and I just looked and stared and looked. And I realized, so what does that have to do with your purpose? Being looking and staring. But I always noticed I was an observer. I could go into any organization or a church or any company organization. I could look and see what's wrong. And I could start to, in my mind, put together solutions and resolutions and form structures to make those organizations flow better. That's secularly and or in a religious or church or faith nonprofit organization. The same talent goes there. I was born with that gift, but I came out looking. So that was indicative of what I would do futuristically. What is the passion that you were born with? That's your purpose. Just because you have a job, your job, J-O-B, is not your purpose. Your job is a means of how you live, support your family. But too many people, their identity is tied up in their job. And so if you are a plant manager, that's not just your purpose alone in life. That's what you're doing at your job. But what is it? What is the thing that you really want to do? You have to put food on your table. You have to be able to sustain yourself. You have to build wealth and equity for those coming behind you. But what is it, that other thing that you always desired to do, but you got caught up in the corporate world and then you forgot? So you have to go back and say, what was it, the thing that made my heart go da-da, loved up? And that's what you have to go back and do. That's the purpose of God for your life. And that's how I found out for mine. I remember when I was a boy, I said I wanted to be a preacher. I got to high school, I said I want to be a teacher. And I wanted to become a principal. Those are all things that I remember saying. And then once I got out of high school and went to college, and then I began to get into ministry. Prior to that too, I started the teaching. That was out. I loved ministry. But then I went back and I went into education and ministry all at the same time. So I found out that those passions, they all were connected, because me being a secular teacher made me a better biblical teacher, an expositor of the Word of God, made me more studious than I was prior to. So it all was connected. And I remember having all these ideas of what I wanted to do. And now I'm walking them out in my life. And I'm not done yet. I'm just leaving the strip. But it's a short strip. But me and the airplane, we're about to take off again.
There you go. I love that. So in our closing, we have about, I'm looking at my clock over here. So we have about a minute and a half to go. Will you encourage our listeners from all over the world right here on the Power Network?
Yes. Hey, I want you to be encouraged. I want you to know that whatever's going on in your life, God has a purpose for you. He sets seasons. Your season may not be the best season right now. It may be a learning season. I sat and I learned for 9 years with my father before I started my own church. I learned for another year and a half under Apostle Richard Hinton. All these things were preparation for what I do now. I learned how to do professional television editing, all these type of things, all in certain seasons. And then when God brings you into your season, all those things that you learned in those frustrating seasons, they come to light when God says it's your time and it's your turn. So I want you to be encouraged. And I want you to know, and do not despise the season that you're in, because God is still working a purpose that's out for your life. Be encouraged. Be a student. Make sure that you learn and you get all that you can, and can all you can get. And as my spiritual daddy said, sit on the can, because there's going to be a time where you're going to open up that can and you're going to pull out all those different nuggets that you learned during those other seasons. And those things are going to take you to your final purpose and destiny. So be encouraged. God has great things for you.
Wow, that is so good. That is so good. Well, thank you so much, Reverend Timothy Lee. Timothy Lee. And encouraging everybody to check you out on Facebook and Instagram. And I know that definitely they are going to give you some great testimonies on what they learned from today. So thank you again so much. And we'll see you all next time on Conversations with Dr. Harriet right here on the Power Network. Have a good day. Bye.